So, welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what part of the world you're from. My name is Michelle Maloney. I'm the National Convener of the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, or AILA, and I'm a proud member of the Asia Pacific Hub of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. And today we're really excited to have an update about a range of rights of nature and other ecocentric issues from the Philippines. First of all, as I'm an Australian, I like to acknowledge country. I like to acknowledge that I live on the unceded lands of the Kabi Kabi people, a fair bit north of Brisbane, Australia. We like to acknowledge all First Nations peoples around the world and around Australia, and acknowledge all of you from communities and First peoples all around the planet and probably our Southeast Asia region. Our two wonderful speakers today are Yolanda Esguerra. She's a long-time environmental advocate and the national coordinator of the Philippine Partnership Inc., the PMPI. And Yolanda will be speaking first, and then Father Edwin Garrigues will be speaking with us after Yoli, and we should have some time for some questions after their presentations. So we're also recording today, so if you do miss any of it, the recording will be up on the GAN website and the AILA website by next week. So without further ado, I'm really delighted to have Yoli join us. How are you today, Yoli?
Hi, I'm good. I'm fine. Nice to see you again.
Yes, wonderful. Over to you for your presentation today about rights of nature in the Philippines.
Okay. Thank you so much. Good day to everyone. So today I will share the story of the rights of nature movement in the Philippines, how it emerged, how it grew, and what makes it distinct from other rights of nature movements worldwide. I do not wish to present our story as just a chronology of events. Instead, I hope you will hear it as a narrative of rerouting, collective courage, and a deepening commitment to protect all life. We all know that if ecosystems collapse, human life collapses with them. This is the catastrophic reality we face. Despite global treaties, negotiations, dialogues, and commitments under OP, the triple planetary crisis remains unabated. And the Philippines stands on the front lines of this crisis. Our communities are saddled by mining operations and aggressive development projects. We are recognized as a biodiversity hotspot, and we are now considered as the world's most climate impacted nation. The rights of nature movement in the Philippines was born from these vulnerabilities and risks and an urgent response to protect life. It is not all about the crisis though, but also how we tried and trying to overcome this crisis. It is thus a story of hope, civil society leadership, religious inspiration, indigenous wisdom, and a deepening commitment to the ecological justice. So this is our story, and this is the story that I wish to share to you. So the socio-ecological context that gave birth to the movement. The Philippines is a small country in the global south with more than 110 million people in population and over 7,000 islands, holds the third longest shoreline in the Asia Pacific, and is home to the Verde Island Passage, considered the Amazon of the sea. That's why the Philippines is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. Yet, we are also a microcosm of a global ecological injustice. The poorest communities bear the brunt of the strongest typhoons and climate disasters. Indigenous lands, farms, and rural communities continue to be mined, reclaimed, and deforested. About 70% of our endemic species are threatened with extinction. And despite numerous environmental laws, enforcement remains weak. These realities created the conditions for a movement that goes beyond the traditional environmentalism. In navigating the socio-political and ecological risks with our partner communities, we drew inspiration from two sources when we started. One, the indigenous inspiration, the Achuaras people of Ecuador's invitation to Western people, to the Pachamama Alliance. Their call to wake up from the dream of the modern world and inviting us to rethink the development paradigm, the modern development paradigm that destroys ecosystem and indigenous ways of life. The worldview, seeing nature as kin, resonates deeply with our own indigenous communities and ourselves. Second, the faith-based inspiration, the Pope Francis call for ecological conversion. Laudato Si calls us to hear both the cry of the poor and the cry of Mother Earth. And this moral framing gave the movement a powerful spiritual anchor. So guided by this indigenous and faith-based inspiration, the Philippine Miserior Partnership, our network, one of the country's largest development and policy lobby network, which has more than 230 organizations as a member, launched the Rights of Nature advocacy in 2018 via a 9-day caravan with the support of the Catholic Bishops' Conference National Secretariat of Social Action, now Caritas Pilipinas. There was a media coverage locally, but also internationally, leading to the partnership with Marie Margil, Rights of Nature advocate in the US, who offered partnership while we were on caravan. So this convergence of global indigenous wisdom, Catholic social teaching, and the Philippine civil society organizing created fertile ground for the movement's birth and growth. We look at the milestones since 2018. So since 2018, the movement has achieved some significant milestones, and each represents not only an achievement, but a deepening of the movement's reach and legitimacy. In 2019, a broad coalition of CSOs, the Rights of Nature Philippines, was formed, signaling that the Rights of Nature advocacy was not only a single organization or a single network initiative, but a collective movement. The same year, the first Rights of Nature bill was filed in Congress with 3 champion lawmakers. And this marked the RON's entry into a national policy discourse. 2019 still, a letter from the first letter from the Catholic bishops was released, and this in a way provided encourage dioceses and parishes and faith communities to embrace our ecological conversion and the Rights of Nature campaign. By 2021, the first local RON ordinance was filed protecting a river in Quezon. 2021 also, the second pastoral letter of the CBCB came out. The bishops supported the campaign and the passage of the Rights of Nature bill itself. No, so directly, they were supporting it. By 2023, the first Indigenous peoples conversation was held. So it led to Bontoc Declaration and embracing the lived experience of the IP and their rights as stewards to their ancestral domain. So this conversation is a turning point for the movement in terms of participation and ensuring that the leadership of indigenous people, participation and leadership of indigenous people in the movement. By 2023, We have institutionalized a rights of nature training. A 2-day training module was developed, enabling over 100 speakers and educators to explain the paradigm and share the good news to communities. By 2024, the first rights of nature environmental code was passed. No, this time it's passed in the island of Marinduque after more than a year of hard work. So the code is now passed, and the community is now trying to enshrine the spirit of the code in their systems, no, in their social systems currently. By 2025, we are happy that the youth, no, the Rights of Nature Youth Philippines was formed. And only last April, they held their General Assembly again, no, and elected their leadership. And youth is important in the movement. They have become our social media warriors and also local advocates in their respective schools and communities. This year also of 2025 marks the passage of a law that tacitly recognizes the rights of nature. It's called Philippine Economic and Natural Capital Accounting System. This law acknowledges the rights of nature and acknowledge that the law must eventually include nature's inherent value in the accounting system. And this strengthens the legal basis for the rights of nature law. This year, we are happy that an academic integration we dream of has happened. The University of the Philippines, one of the most prestigious university in the country, offered a course, a short course, a module on the rights of nature last May 2026. 2026 also, this year, we again expanded our conversations with our indigenous peoples, with communities in around again the Oro River Basin and the Aitas and Remontado of Aurora, Quezon, and Rizal, deepening further the indigenous participation and leadership in the movement. This year also, 2026, we have refiled the Rights of Nature Bill with the support of 43 lawmakers, and which is a product of a legislative forum and exhibits in the halls of Congress. So coming from 3 lawmakers, we now have 43 lawmakers supporting the bill. Another bill, which we call a twin bill, was filed, Ecocide Bill, no, which is also our response to an international campaign, no, on the Ecocide Bill to stop severe, widespread, and long-term destruction of ecosystem. And we have an ongoing work that excites us and challenges us also. There is an ongoing project piloting a Ron community in Marinduque and a series of forum and discussions to craft the Philippine economic development paradigm through the rights of nature lens. So as you can see, as we approach a decade of advocacy in 2028, these milestones reflect the movement's growth, diversity, and deepening reach. Beyond, we reflect also on the key factors behind the movement's growth. So beyond the urgency of the ecological crisis, to respond to it, several factors have strengthened the movement. I think there are 4. 1, a robust civil society tradition. The Philippines has one of the most vibrant civil society sectors in the Asia Pacific, from the anti-dictatorship struggle of the 1970s to the EDSA People Power Revolution. Civic engagement has shaped national transformation, and this tradition continues to energize the Ron movement in the Philippines. Second, people's religiosity. As the only predominantly Catholic country in Asia, the Church remains a moral compass. Laudato Si's call for ecological conversion and our bishop's strong environmental advocacy have inspired and strengthened the movement. Third, the indigenous worldviews. The Philippines is home to 110 indigenous groups whose cosmologies see nature as kin, alive, spirited, and sacred. Their wisdom informs key provisions of the proposed rights of nature law currently, including the recognition of territories of life, customary laws, indigenous governance system, and indigenous knowledge practices and systems. And fourth, our rural communities and cultural values. In the country that is predominantly peasant and having fisher folk communities, relational values such as inang kalikasan or nature as mother, kapwa, or shared identity and connectedness, and bayanihan, a communal unity and collective action are still evident. These values shape the movement's advocacy for a sapat lifestyle, a sufficient, simple, and regenerative way of living. Looking at the distinct character of the movement, while we are aligned with global critiques of anthropocentrism and commodification of nature, the Philippine movement has evolved into a broad all systems approach towards change. It is not only about granting legal rights to ecosystem as a focus, but it is a call for a paradigm shift towards a new human-nature relationship and a transformation of economic, legal, political, and socio-cultural systems that are disconnected and separated from human nature. So that if you look, our advocacy pushes for a systemic change, a system shift in the economics from an extractivist model to a circular, localized, and regenerative economy, engaging planners, architects, engineers, and bureaucrats. Legal, from an ecosystem and species without rights to ecosystem and species with legal standing, just like humans, and one that can be represented like future generations. For the political, from a human-centric governance to an ecocentric governance, where local leaders recognize that all creation is part of the community of life and are actually their citizens. And social-cultural, from a materialistic, wasteful, nature-distant lifestyle to a sufficient, relational, and ecologically grounded way of living, engaging the communities, the church, and the academy in particular. There's also a shift in the way we view our advocacy or the basis. Why are we protecting nature? Environmental protection, as we know it now, is no longer justified solely for human benefit, for our use, but we protect them because we need them, but it is grounded in nature's intrinsic value, dignity, and sentience. Nature is no longer an object. It is a living and rights-bearing entity that has to be respected. We also know that there is an integration of language in the movement that reflects its roots, religious, indigenous peoples, and the CSO. So the call, for example, to a paradigm shift is also the call for ecological conversion by Laudato Si and the encyclical. The rights of nature framework is an indigenous life race with Mother Nature, or the governance of the commons is simply the indigenous knowledge systems and practices and governance system of the IPs. And the philosophical systems for change become a process of decolonization to shun the imposed colonial culture and to recover our traditional and indigenous way of living and values that were forcibly taken away from us when we were colonized. So today, we say that the Philippines stands as one of the global South's emerging model for rights of nature advocacy. We also stand in solidarity with other Asia Pacific countries and regions around the world, ready to learn from one another. But we offer an experience rooted in community organizing, indigenous participation, and leadership, faith-based engagement, legislative innovation as valuable lessons for the global movement. We will continue to strengthen community education, promote youth and indigenous leadership, advance legislative advocacy, build ecological governance initiatives, push for a regenerative and viable economic development, and expand international partnership, especially in the Asia Pacific region. The rights of nature is not merely a legal innovation for us. It is a global push towards a regenerative future, a new model of governance that recognizes all creation as citizens of the world and embraces the symbiotic relationship of all beings. It is in this context and perspective that the Philippines Rights of Nature movement is ready to walk with other global movements towards a better world where all beings can exist, thrive, live in a mutually beneficial manner and together in one common home. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yoli. That was a really wonderful overview of all the hard work that you and your community groups and other groups have been doing. Thank you so much. First, I want to thank Emelina for her lovely comments. She said, "Thank you, Madam Yoli, for inspiring the rights of nature in the Philippines. Such a wonderful presentation." Yoli, I wonder if you can comment a little bit more on the pre-colonial law of Indigenous people and to what extent are Indigenous peoples' laws respected in the nation state of the Philippines so that rights of nature is fitting in with that? Can you talk a bit more about how that all works? Or because in the Australian context, I'm sure you know, it's very complex because we have a pre-existing legal system for Aboriginal people that they made for many thousands of years.
Yes, it's not different from your experience actually. So they have a customary law. Of course, they have an indigenous people's governance system and indigenous knowledge systems and practices that are actually being disregarded and not recognized in the Philippines. So this is part of the struggle of the indigenous peoples for many years, and what the rights of nature movement is just carrying and pushing forward this struggle of the indigenous peoples. So, like in many of our secular governance systems, there are, for example, indigenous members, MRs, we call it, yet these representatives are not really being heard in the local councils of many of the local councils of the municipalities. So that's the sad part, no?
So, Yoli, when it comes to the rights of nature, do your conversations with other people and particularly with Indigenous groups, do they feel that the rights of nature is an exact fit for their worldview, or is it something they see as a bridge, a concept that can help non-Indigenous people understand relationship and kinship ties with nature? I'm wondering how
Yeah,
they, yeah, explain that in the Philippines. It's very interesting.
yeah. In a way, they were saying during the conversations that what you are saying is actually our life. So what you are doing is just codifying the way our life, no? That's what they said. And some of them even said na, yes, if you think this will help you understand better, then codify it. Although they say one said they are not very optimistic because the way the law is being implemented is another challenge, no? But
Yes.
they say yes, do so, because at least that will give us a tool to be able to push for this kind of perspective.
Thank you so much. I'll now invite Father Edwin Garrigues to share with us, and I'll spotlight him as our speaker, and then we'll come back to Yoli and Edwin for speakers' questions at the end.
So, good morning, everyone, and thanks for giving us this opportunity to discuss with you our journey in the Rights of Nature campaign. Exactly saying what I want to continue on with an output of what we did for the IP conversation
Yes.
just recently in May with the indigenous peoples of Sierra Madre. So what Yoli is saying is just like that actually rights of nature is not actually merely a legal concept that we borrowed, but this is deeply embedded in the living traditions of the indigenous communities. And that's what we really observe. And this is one major realizations that we had during this indigenous peoples conversation in the Cordillera. So these are the indigenous peoples that joined the conversation. And this is actually the context. We're trying to move from indigenous wisdom, how to relate it to the rights of nature as ecological jurisprudence, so to say. Because if we come to think of it and examine, analyze, rights of nature paradigm, indigenous wisdoms are actually very, very identical, very almost the same, and in complete contradiction to the prevailing industrial or technological, like for example modern development. What we emphasize in the development framework in the modern world is the economic growth, extraction, profit, unlimited consumption. But on the other hand, the indigenous peoples, indigenous wisdom would put more emphasis on stewardship, reciprocity, restraint, harmonious relationship, and responsibility. So this is very much in line with the jurisprudence that we are trying to push. And then what we try to articulate is this: the whole context of how indigenous foundation of how they see nature as sacred becomes really a major concept in the rights of nature framework. One, the indigenous peoples see nature as sacred from the creator. Nature is understood as a gift entrusted to humanity for stewardship and ownership. Therefore, it is sacred. So this kind of sacrality of nature, this is something very much part of the indigenous tradition. Also, nature as living presence. We say it in Filipinos. So it's not only nature does not only gives life, but it's also life giving. And we say, why does it matter? Because if we view nature as somewhat living and life giving rather than property, we see nature as we see the importance of conservation becoming an act of care. The environmental protection becomes a moral responsibility, and ecological stewardship becomes part of one's identity. And that's very much part of the indigenous consciousness. Also, the communal character of the earth. So, for indigenous peoples, earth is considered a sacred community. The earth belongs to everyone. It's a communal inheritance, it's a shared home, a common home, as Pope Francis would call it. And it's also challenges the extractivist perspective, which is very much prominent in the way we view the world. That explains many indigenous communities. That's why they are very much opposed to destructive mining, deforestation, and large-scale extractive industries like these dams. They oppose development not because the activities destroy the very relationship that sustains life. And if nature is family or kin, exploitation becomes morally unacceptable. And protecting nature becomes an act of protecting ourselves, our communities, and also the future generation. And another thing is that the way indigenous peoples understand development is totally, again, very different, or say in contradictory to the modern concept of development, where we measured development in terms of GDP, industrialization, investments, infrastructure, resource extraction, and material wealth. For the indigenous peoples, what is more important is the harmonious relationship. In Filipino, it's called ugnayang buhay. The healthy communities, the cultural continuity, social justice, ecological integrity, the responsibility toward future generations. So that's why if we try to make a kind of schematic summary presentation of our indigenous concept, relating it to how do they define ecological relationship, and also aligning it with the jurisprudence of the rights of nature. This is but I would not be able to discuss this at great length and in detail, because this is it needs time, and we do not have the luxury of time. And another important part of indigenous consciousness is this concept about territories of life. And this is very much also part of the rights of nature that we are pursuing. Land is not simply land or property. The ancestral domain, as indigenous peoples will call their land, it's a living ecosystems. It's a sacred spaces. It's land as cultural landscapes, biodiversity sanctuaries, and all indigenous homeland. So this is not just land. And the proposed rights of nature actually try to recognize the ecosystems as having all those inherent rights: right to exist, right to regenerate, maintain ecological processes, right to restoration. And so the nature itself gains legal protection, and that the law allows ecosystems to be represented in court, and to defend their very rights. And the government has the duty. We give the government its duty bound to prevent ecological destruction, apply precautionary principle, prevent extinction, stop irreversible damages. And it's all in the rights of nature bill that we are proposing. So it's just articulating the indigenous perspective actually. So the shift from the perspective is necessary. Nature is no longer simply as property, and that's the common understanding in the whole modern industrial perspective. But nature becomes a right-bearing community of life. So this is very much part of the indigenous people's consciousness. And now, one thing that we find it difficult also to explain is the legality or the standing of the nature itself. The law grants nature legal personality. For the indigenous peoples, this is perfectly understandable. They have they really do not have any problem understanding that. Traditionally, because in our system, traditionally only persons or corporations possesses legal standing, and nature is treated as property, natural. That's why we call it natural resources. We have a department for that, or object of ownership. But in the proposed Rights of Nature Bill, we acknowledge, we recognize ecosystems as having legal entities. They are holders of rights, subjects to legal protections, meaning forests, rivers, mountains, they are they become real party of interest in the legal proceedings. And the role of the indigenous peoples, the indigenous communities, they are recognized having rights to take care of the environment, to become ecological guardians and custodians of the territories of life. Why is this important? Because the law becomes proactive. So instead of waiting until environmental damage occurs, it seeks to prevent ecological harm before it becomes quite irreversible. And now I just go over some major points of convergence between the rights of nature and the indigenous wisdoms. Just to mention some, both indigenous peoples' wisdom and the rights of nature's bill affirm, one, that nature possesses intrinsic value, and it's also in the Laudato Si of Pope Francis, by the way. Secondly, nature deserves respect beyond its usefulness to humans. So beyond the anthropocentric, as Yoli already explained, beyond the anthropocentric framework. And humans belong within the larger community of life. And it's also in the Laudato Si Pope Francis, this concept. You see how everything can align. Life is sustained through interconnected relationships. and indigenous stewardship strengthens our ecological governance. And of course, we both, all of those concepts refuse to accept the anthropocentric framework, unlimited exploitation kind of orientation that we have in modern times, and also the purely extractive development concept. Instead, we promote stewardship, ecological responsibility, interdependence. So this is also a good way to visually understand all these convergences. And you have, I tried also to put this into writing. I mean, the whole discussion on this, and you can have it given to you by the secretariat if I will not be able to discuss this all in this forum. Because what I would like also to emphasize and to highlight is the distinct Filipino model of eco governance that we would like to have in the Philippines Rights of Nature. I think we do some borrowings. In fact, if we try to compare other countries, their framework of or their jurisprudence of rights of nature, it's very much almost the same with the Philippines. But what we are trying to do is to come up with our own distinct contribution. First, our concept of RON in the Philippines must have a kind of synthesis of multiple traditions. I mean, considering the indigenous ecological wisdom, this is one primary source. And also, we already have the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, or IPRA. And as our lawyer would say, even our many laws on the environment, our constitution would have some elements of rights of nature already present, and also ecological science. And because the Philippines is one major Christian or Catholic country in Asia, of course, we need to also align it with the Laudato Si, the Catholic or Christian ethical tradition. So, and to conclude, I think I just enumerated some major takeaways for our forum today. First is that the indigenous ecological wisdom offers one of the strongest alternative to today's dominant model of development. Secondly, indigenous ecological wisdom offers secondly, the ecological crisis is fundamentally moral, spiritual, and ethical. Climate change, all these problems of biodiversity loss, they are symptoms of deeper problems such as greed, excessive consumption, exploitation, treating nature merely as economic commodity. Third, indigenous peoples are among the world's most effective ecological guardians. Their traditions for so long a time have protected forests, watersheds, biodiversity, and they have their sustainable ways of life that we can perhaps model our lives to. And fourth, the Rights of Nature movement recognizes possesses intrinsic worth and deserves legal protection. And last but not the least, humanity now faces a civilizational choice. We are in a divergent path. Either we take the path of domination, extraction, or ecological exploitation, or we can choose a rather totally different future based on reverence, reciprocity, ecological justice, sustainability, care for creation. Is very much affirmed in the worldviews of the indigenous peoples. And with the rights of nature, as Yoli also emphasized, represents a new vision of justice, the dignity of creation, the rights of ecosystems, the wisdom of indigenous peoples, and the humanity's responsibility towards future generation. And I will end with Pope Francis' reminder that everything is interconnected. Indigenous peoples have lived their truth for generations, and the challenge before us is to ensure that our laws, institutions, patterns of development finally reflect this enduring wisdom of indigenous peoples reflected in the rights of nature jurisprudence.
Thank you so much, Edwin. And thank you for two excellent presentations. And every time I hear from PMPI and anyone in the Philippines, I'm so impressed with all of the work you've been doing over the last decade. We have two questions. I think one's actually been answered in the text, but could someone speak to the ecocide bill or developments in the Philippines, and where is that up to?
Yes, the bill was filed last, I think, 2 months ago. by a political party here in the Philippines, and it's now referred. The first it was read first reading, so we are pushing for a committee level hearing for the ecocide bill. So that's the situation now. This bill.
Thank you. And do you think it has a potential for success? Do you think it will be passed into law?
Well, according to the lawmakers, they say that this will have a better chance than the Rights of Nature bill. So we're rooting for it also because it will be very helpful to have the ecocide bill also in the Philippines.
Thank you. You've touched on my next question. So the Rights of Nature bill, which I've read, which is wonderful, it's very good. Is it still, where is it up to in your political process?
Yeah, it has been. So as I said, the support from the lawmakers has dramatically increased from 3 to 43 lawmakers. And now it's referred and has already had a hearing, referred to the ecology committee, and a technical working group draft and consolidate the proposed bill already and presented it to a multi-stakeholders, national government agencies, business groups, CSO groups, and solicited feedback from their draft. And we are now in the stage where another hearing from the committee will take place. But this after a series of consultations also with the CSOs from our end. So now we have another draft to be offered to them coming from their draft bill and what we can accept from their suggestions and the other stakeholder suggestions.
Mm. And if the law, the Rights of Nature law, is successful and goes through, when would that, with your timing, when would that happen, do you think?
Actually, I was telling the people in many of in our recent consultations, we have to push for it that it should be passed within the 20th Congress. That means before 2028, because that's another election time. And if we do not, at least it should reach the third reading. If it reaches the third reading, then we will not have to refile it again.
Very good.
The good thing is that we have so many congressmen already endorsing or
Yes.
sponsoring the bill. So we have upper edge as regards to other bills that we are pushing, green bill.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
fantastic progress. Well done. It's very hard work to get anything into the political space, so well done. We have a couple of great questions here. Oh, sorry, you go.
Yeah, I would like, there's question about property rights, remember?
That's what I was
In
going to
the
go to
chat?
next. Yes.
Yes. So the bill has not yet been passed, no, but that is a question we always encounter. But we always say that the rights of nature law will not abolish private property rights, but we think it will limit and redefine them because the core shift is that the private property can no longer be used in ways that will significantly harm the ecosystem. So we will always think and we will limit the use of that property, thinking of the carrying capacity. So within that perspective, I think that will happen. And it will be the law says other concepts or laws will also be reviewed when the rights of nature law is passed so that it can be synchronized.
Excellent. There's a number of questions coming through now. So there is a question that's linked to the private property idea from Erica asking, I think it's Erica. No, Marvin. Sorry, Marvin. How do you think many of the legislators will take rights of nature when they are often very fully involved in business and who have a vested interest really in private property rights? What is your
you
thoughts
want
on
to
that?
answer that?
Yeah, just one important lesson learned in the way we do our advocacy on land rights. We have a more radical law actually, the Agrarian Reform Law, and we were able to really implement it somehow, although not very successfully. But this is again, private property is not absolute. And that's also the same thing that we are saying here. You need to consider the impact of people using some few people having these land properties for their own. This is, I mean, to be more ethical about it, and it should also reflect in the law that there should be some kind of ecological justice, and it's part of the agrarian law, and it will be the same as we just try to widen it to include nature itself.
Mm, thank you. There's actually a question that's been asked, which I'll start with because I'm curious how the RON movement in Australia is progressing and how do the Philippines and Australia connect. Well, first of all, Australia is a very challenging country to bring rights of nature into. We've been talking about rights of nature, and we're a tiny organisation, AILA. There's only two of us. We've been talking about rights of nature, educating people for about 10 years. We've had a lot of false starts with communities who want to take it up and want to promote rights of nature. They've either run out of energy or they discover that trying to change 3 layers of government with extremely big fossil fuel companies in the way, whilst they're also trying to tackle immediate problems facing them. For all those many complex reasons, it's been a difficult terrain to work within, but there's some really interesting progress at the moment. And next Monday night, I'll actually be in Sydney with folks from the Total Environment Centre. There is a big movement where lots of people are interested in river rights. The other layer that's really important, and AILA goes slowly because here in Australia, we are one of the newest countries to be colonised. So we're working in a place where all of the Aboriginal and Indigenous people's first laws are still in place. So what we have to make sure is that rights of nature isn't just another colonial layer of law slapping on top of what First Nations people already want. And when you work with Aboriginal and First Nations peoples, as many of us do, they're already working on country. They're already doing all of the things that they want to do. And sometimes for those groups, rights of nature isn't the right framework. It's been a very, very complex, layered space to work within from our point of view. However, we're passionate about ecocentric governance, and we are part of GAN. We've been part of the Asia Pacific Hub from the beginning, and there's a lot of quiet progress happening with a number of Indigenous communities that we're working with and a number of communities that are perhaps more led by non-Indigenous folks, and they're working in partnership with local First Laws peoples. So there's a lot happening. And if you're interested in what's happening in Australia, please do connect with AILA. You can email AELA. Sarah will put it in the email in the chat, aila@earthlaws.org.au. And we're really keen to chat with anyone. We've got a couple of young students coming in shortly to try to start a youth movement. But there's a lot of reasons why environmental issues in Australia are very much focused on stopping fossil fuels, because we are such a corporately captured country because of the curse of our mineral wealth. So when you look at other countries, they have some of the same problems, but everywhere is different. So that's a very concise, short version of why it appears different things may not be happening, but there's a lot of community interest and bubbling up. And also in 2019, we worked with a number of Greens politicians in Western Australia. They introduced a rights of nature law, and also for future generations. We knew that it wouldn't get through. The parliament, the state government is very focused on fossil fuels. So again, and in Australia, we have 3 levels of government, and each jurisdiction is its own garden of challenging flowers. Let's put it that way. So, but please do stay involved with the movement and connect with us and others when you wish. So we're just over time, but the final question is, it sounds like the youth have really been involved in the Philippines rights of nature movement. Did you want to talk for just a minute or two about that? And then we might wrap up for the day.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I said we now have a robust youth network and organization. It's a national organization of youth called the Rights of Nature Philippines, which started and was formed last year in 2024. And now in this year, they had their another general assembly. And the youth groups in the Philippines are very much active in their advocacies, especially in social media. But they are also in schools and they are young professionals. So what they do is form circles of friends and organizations and share to them the perspective and advocacy. And in one conference I attended where almost half our youth One said that they are not only the future, but they are actually the present. Meaning,
Yes.
it today they have to act, no, because they are the present. They are not only there in the future. So it's really very very inspiring to hear youth, no, claim perspective of the now, that they have to urgently act now.
Very important and very wonderful. And look, the final question someone has asked, so is the church, the Catholic Church, really strong, and does it sway politics in your country?
Yes.
I
Father,
think
can you answer that?
that
Yes,
question is for
Edwin.
me. I think Yoli already underlined and emphasized that point. The Philippines being predominantly Catholics, so the opinions or even the positions of the CBCP or the group of bishops would have a real sway in the way we do our policies and our. There have been already two CBCP statements on rights of nature. And also, it's not only this statement. Just recently, we also meet with the parliamentarians, with the Congress people, congressmen, the representatives, to try to explore possibilities in how can we be able to pursue our moral advocacy in terms of environment, human rights, and other things in the Philippine Congress. So this is a continuing engagement. And I'm just happy that the Philippine Church is not very conservative. We are more progressive in terms of really pushing for environmental jurisprudence and also rights-based laws in the country. Because this is part of the whole renewal in the church. We are called to become Church of the Poor. So as Pope Francis already emphasized, the rights of the earth, or the cry of the earth is the cry of the poor. So they go together. So that becomes also one of the important pillars of our campaign, the Laudato Si.
Mm, yes, and Laudato Si had a huge impact in Australia too, whenever it was, 10, 15 years ago, whatever, sorry. But then it, like everything in Australia, it got diluted into lots of different faith groups and lots of different calls and lots of different environmental groups. And so we have a very fragmented system in Australia compared to other places, and some of it can be very good and some of it can be very challenging. So but enough from Australia. Yolanda and Edwin, thank you so much for sharing your amazing work and stories from the Philippines. We have put an email address for PMPI in there, but Sarah and I are also at the end of an email called ayla@earthlaws.org.au. So if you get lost or you want to chase the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature and find what everyone around the world is up to, so I'm just going to put Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. Have a look at that, and also look up the Eco Jurisprudence Monitor. It's a website that a number of people keep up to date with lots of rights of nature and ecocentric governance tips all around the world. So on that note, I want to say a huge thank you to PMPI and to everyone who spoke today and everyone who's part of it. And yeah, please do check out the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. And if you're in Australia, check out AILA. We are small but mighty and working with a lot of different folks across a lot of different things. So on that note, I'll give the final word to Yolanda and Edwin to say goodbye. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you to all of you. This is a global campaign, and we're together in really pushing for the rights of nature.
Thank you. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you,
Yes,
everybody.
thank you so much for coming. We hope we can join in this journey to protect our common home.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.